Welcome to another deep dive with us. This time, we're going to dive into the geopolitical landscape.
Ooh, intriguing.
Yeah, and explore the implications of something pretty big, the fall of the Assad regime in Syria.
Right.
And, our guide for this is really none other than Alexander Dugin.
Of course, often called Putin's brain.
Exactly, and his perspective,
Yeah.
which we've drawn from this excerpt we have right here, is anything but conventional.
Yeah, I mean, what I find so intriguing about Dugin's analysis is that he doesn't see the Syrian conflict as like an isolated event,
Right.
He views it as a piece of a much larger puzzle, like a deliberate strategy to diminish Russia's global standing.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit. He doesn't just throw out this idea of a grand scheme against Russia.
Right.
He actually points to specific areas like Georgia, Moldova, and the broader Middle East as interconnected elements of this plan.
Exactly. He's suggesting that what might appear to be isolated incidents are actually carefully orchestrated maneuvers to weaken Russia's influence on multiple fronts. Think of it as a geopolitical game of chess,
Okay.
where each move is designed to put Russia at a disadvantage.
So you're saying that understanding the events in Syria requires us to look beyond the immediate conflict?
Yes.
And consider its potential connections to these other regions? That's a pretty thought-provoking concept.
Absolutely. And this is where Dugin's analysis becomes particularly insightful. He encourages us to consider how seemingly unrelated events might be part of a larger pattern of strategic maneuvering.
Now, Dugin doesn't shy away from controversial claims.
No, he doesn't.
He even links the escalation of the Syrian conflict to American politics, suggesting it was intentionally fueled to undermine Trump's presidency and force him into a confrontational stance with Russia.
Yes. This is a bold assertion, and it speaks to Dugin's belief in a deeper level of political maneuvering.
Wow.
He's implying that events in Syria were manipulated to influence the American political landscape.
I'm curious, what specific evidence does he present to support this claim of intentional manipulation? How convincing is his argument?
Well, he doesn't offer concrete proof in this particular excerpt.
Okay.
He does point to the timing of certain events and the reactions they provoked.
Right.
He suggests a deliberate effort to create a scenario that would damage Trump's standing and further strain U.S.-Russia relations.
It definitely raises questions about the interplay between domestic politics and international conflicts.
For sure.
If we connect this to the broader context of the Arab Spring and the destabilization of other countries in the region, it does make you wonder about the role of external forces in shaping these events.
Absolutely. Dugin's analysis challenges us to look beyond the surface and consider the motivations and actions of various actors on the global stage.
Now that we've explored Dugin's view of Syria's role in this grand scheme, let's examine how he connects it to American politics, specifically the Trump presidency.
Okay.
He argues that...
Hold on, before we jump into that, he also points a finger at some other powerful players, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't he specifically name Israel as having its own agenda in Syria?
He does. He claims that certain global powers, including Israel, saw an opportunity in the Syrian conflict to achieve their own objectives.
Right.
And these objectives, according to him, included removing Assad, pushing out Russian and Iranian influence, and creating a weakened Syria that would serve their interests.
It's all very strategic.
He even mentions secret deals within the Syrian military, possibly even involving Assad's family.
Wow.
Sounds like something out of a spy thriller.
It does, doesn't it? It highlights the complexity and intrigue of Dugin's worldview. He sees a lot happening beneath the surface, a web of hidden agendas and behind-the-scenes maneuvering.
It's fascinating, but it also begs the question, is there any evidence to back up these claims of secret deals and manipulations, or is this just speculation?
That's a valid question.
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't provide concrete proof in this piece.
Okay.
He's implying a level of orchestration and manipulation that goes beyond the official narratives.
It's definitely a perspective that encourages us to think critically and to question the information we receive.
Precisely. Dugin's analysis challenges us to consider multiple perspectives and to dig deeper, to uncover the underlying forces driving global events. Yeah.
Okay, so this is really interesting stuff.
I know, right? It's a lot to think about.
It is.
Okay, well.
All right, let's take a quick break, and we'll come back and unpack some more of this.
Sounds good.
It's wild, right? Dugin's perspective really challenges us to examine the narratives we often hear about global events.
Yeah.
He's essentially flipping the script and saying, hey, maybe those portrayed as the good guys aren't so innocent after all.
Right.
It's a perspective that's sure to generate discussion.
Yeah, it's like holding up a mirror to our own assumptions and asking, are we getting the whole picture or are we missing crucial pieces of the puzzle?
Exactly. And I think that's what makes Dugin so captivating. He pushes boundaries and encourages us to question our own viewpoints.
So now let's delve deeper into Dugin's analysis of the Syrian conflict itself.
He seems to emphasize the role of extremist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Is he suggesting they were deliberately used to destabilize the region?
That's certainly the implication. He argues that these groups, while claiming to fight for their own agendas, were effectively tools in a larger game orchestrated by those seeking to weaken Syria and undermine Russia's influence.
So it sounds almost like a conspiracy theory.
Right.
But when you consider the chaos that followed the Arab Spring and how these groups exploited the resulting power vacuums, it's not entirely implausible.
You're right, and this is where Dugin's understanding of history is key. He connects events in Syria to the broader wave of unrest that swept across the Middle East, arguing that powerful actors often take advantage of instability for their own gain.
So he's suggesting a pattern of manipulation using regional dynamics to achieve strategic objectives.
Yes.
And in this case, the objective was to prevent the emergence of a truly multipolar world.
Precisely. He sees the fall of the Assad regime as a victory for those who want to maintain a unipolar world dominated by a single power, and a setback for those who advocate for a more balanced distribution of global power.
That brings up an interesting question. If that's the case, why didn't Russia and China increase their support for Assad even if it meant a larger military commitment? Why not go all in to prevent this strategic loss?
That's an excellent point, and it highlights the limitations of power, even for nations as influential as Russia and China.
Right.
There are always constraints, economic, political, and even moral, that affect a country's ability to intervene in another nation's affairs.
So even though Dugin portrays this as a loss for Russia, are you suggesting they might have had their reasons for not escalating further?
It's certainly a possibility. While we can't definitively know what decisions were made behind closed doors, it's crucial to remember that foreign policy is rarely straightforward.
It reminds us that we're always dealing with limited information and multiple perspectives when trying to grasp complex situations like the Syrian conflict.
Absolutely. It underscores the importance of remaining open to different interpretations and considering the motivations of all the players involved.
Dugin paints a fairly bleak picture of the situation.
He does.
But does he offer any glimmers of hope? Does he see any chance for a course correction? Or is he resigned to the idea that the multipolar world is fading away?
He certainly acknowledges the gravity of the situation and the sense of defeat felt by many Russians concerning the outcome in Syria.
Yeah.
However, he views this as a wake-up call, a potential turning point that could energize the forces advocating for a multipolar world.
So instead of giving up, he's urging a renewed effort, a learning experience to come back stronger.
Exactly. He argues that Russia, China, India, and other emerging powers must learn from the Syrian experience and strengthen their cooperation to challenge the existing global order.
It sounds like he's calling for a new type of alliance, one based not just on shared interests, but on a shared vision for a more just and equitable world.
That's a very insightful observation. He's essentially arguing that a multipolar world needs to be more than a geopolitical concept. It must be rooted in principles of solidarity, mutual respect, and a genuine commitment to a more balanced and inclusive global system.
This raises a compelling question. What would such a multipolar world look like in practice? How would it differ from the current system?
That's where things get truly fascinating.
Okay.
Dugin offers some clues in his analysis.
Okay.
He emphasized the importance of supporting minority groups, promoting genuine democracy, which he distinguishes from Western-style liberal democracy, and countering the spread of what he considers to be radical ideologies.
So it's not simply about shifting the balance of power, but about creating a world where diverse cultures and beliefs can coexist peacefully and power is more equitably distributed.
Precisely. It's a vision that challenges many assumptions of the current global order, prompting questions about how such a system would be structured and maintained.
He's almost advocating for a paradigm shift, a fundamental rethinking of how we organize ourselves as a global community.
And that's precisely why engaging with Dugin's ideas is so crucial, even if you don't agree with every point.
Right.
He compels us to think beyond the confines of the existing system and envision alternative possibilities for the future.
It reminds us that the future isn't predetermined. It's something we shape through our choices and actions.
Right.
And while the Syrian conflict is a tragedy, it can also be seen as a catalyst for a much-needed conversation about the kind of world we want to build. Now, Dugan goes on to talk about how Russia and China actually intervened in Syria, despite ultimately not being able to save Assad. Let's explore that intervention in more detail because it reveals a lot about their commitment to this region.
Sure.
So you mentioned that Russia and China actually intervened in Syria, even though in the end their efforts couldn't save Assad.
Right.
Let's actually get into that intervention because I think it really says a lot about how committed they were to this region.
Absolutely. According to Dugan, both Russia and China stepped in, providing both military and economic support
Wow.
to try and prevent the complete collapse of the Syrian state.
Huh.
Their goals, he suggests, were to preserve the secular regime
Okay.
and protect minority groups that were caught in the crossfire.
Their involvement spanned over a decade, right? That's a significant commitment of resources and manpower. What does that tell us about their priorities in the Middle East?
It demonstrates that they saw Syria as a strategically crucial point and weren't willing to simply abandon it.
Right.
They were determined to maintain a foothold in the region and prevent what they perceived as a Western-backed regime change.
Right.
However, as we know, even their sustained support wasn't enough to prevent Assad's eventual downfall.
So if even their combined efforts couldn't turn the tide in Syria, what does that mean for the future of their vision for a multipolar world?
Yeah, this is where Dugan's analysis gets really interesting.
Okay.
He sees the loss in Syria as a significant blow to the multipolar project, emboldening those pushing for a world dominated by a single power.
It seems like he's issuing a warning, a call to action for those who believe in a more balanced global order.
He absolutely is. Dugan argues that Russia, China, India, and other emerging powers need to learn from this experience and strengthen their cooperation if they want to counterbalance the influence of the West.
He's essentially saying we need to get our act together if we want to create a truly multipolar world.
Right.
But how do we translate that into concrete action? What specific steps does he propose?
Well, Dugan calls for increased coordination and strategic alignment among these nations. He emphasizes the need for them to present a united front, not just in terms of military and economic power,
Right.
but also in terms of ideology and vision.
So it's not just about forming alliances. It's
Yes.
about developing a shared understanding of the world and working together to shape it according to that vision.
Exactly. He suggests that a multipolar world can't simply be declared. It has to be actively built and defended through coordinated action and a shared commitment to a different set of principles.
This brings us back to a question we touched on earlier. What would this multipolar world actually look like in practice? What are the defining characteristics of this alternative global order that Dugan envisions?
Well, he offers some intriguing clues. He talks about the need to support minority groups, promote genuine democracy, which he distinguishes from Western-style liberal democracy,
Interesting.
and counteract the spread of what he considers to be radical ideologies.
So it sounds like he's proposing a world where power is more evenly distributed, where diversity is respected and protected, and where different cultures and belief systems can coexist peacefully.
That's a good summation of his vision.
Wow.
He's advocating for a fundamental shift in how we think about global governance and the relationships between nations. He's challenging the very foundations of the existing international order and urging us to imagine something entirely different.
It's a bold and ambitious vision, and it certainly raises a lot of questions. Is it achievable? What are the potential pitfalls? These are questions we could spend hours discussing. But for now, I want to leave our listener with something to ponder. Dugan clearly views the Syrian conflict as a turning point, a moment of truth for those who advocate for a multipolar world. But what do you think? Is this a harbinger of greater conflict and instability, or could it be a catalyst for a more just and peaceful global order? We encourage you to continue exploring these complex dynamics and to draw your own conclusions. And remember, the Deep Dive is always here to help you navigate the complexities of the world and to extract the most insightful nuggets of knowledge from the sources you share with us.